Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Abel, Yahshua, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Abel, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl Abel now entering the sanctuary. It's a privilege and honor to present to you son of Yisrayl Abel, Great Kohan.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May be seated. Okay, today I'll be talking about the purpose of our calling. And when I was getting ready for this speech, I was actually thinking about a title that I'll give for this speech. And I chose the calling because because in these last days, He is calling a lot of people to His house. Finish the work that was started by the first righteous priest. So I'll be going over only a few of them, and the first one will be to be given authority, the second one to get cleansing, and the third one is to be tested. So, moving on to the first one. So, Yahweh did not just call us just for the sake of it. So, He had a reason behind it. And if you could look over to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, is on the first page of the book of Yahweh. And it says, "Then I will make man in my image, according to my likeness. They will have rulership over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So, from that we clearly see that Yahweh's purpose for calling us is to give us authority. So, and also Pastor's been talking about this in the Yisrayl Says program. Be reading from the fourth book of Israel, Reverence of Yahweh, chapter 9, and that's verse 15. Pastor says, 1 Corinthians 6:9. "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? You are here to inherit the kingdom of Yahweh, aren't you? This is your purpose, to obtain the offices that Yahweh planned before the world began. Before He ever created the world to put man on, He created the offices that you are to hold. I can show you this in scriptures and make it so plain that a child can understand it. He created these offices for His family first, for every family member. He says to the ones He's calling out right now in this day and time, your offices were set before you this world was ever created." Think about that. That is what we are here to inherit. We will not inherit if we don't start to overcome these petty things that are displeasing to Yahweh and even displeasing to the neighbor next to you. So you see, Pastor explains why we were called. That's the first reason. So back to Genesis 1:26, and the first few verses, it says that I will make man in my image according to my likeness. So if you realize that, but it says I will make man in my image according to my likeness. So we are already in His likeness, but not His image. And Yahweh's image is His positive character traits. or what are called the attributes in the book of Yahweh. And if you could please turn to Exodus, the book of Exodus, and chapter 34, that's on page 73, and it says on verse 6 and 7, it says, Yahweh passed in front of him and proclaimed, Yahweh, Yahweh, Almighty, merciful and compassionate, long-suffering, and abounding in righteousness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished those who are guilty, who visits the sins of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So those are the positive character traits for Yahweh. So we can be in unity. We can be in unity with Yahweh if we strive to attain these positive character traits or attributes. And also the same things mentioned in the peaceful solution. So they will enable us to interact peacefully with all our brothers. And also, moving on to the second one, which is to get cleansing. So I'll just be using a few examples like a carpenter. He needs certain tools for a certain job. And also a potter who uses clay to make articles out of clay. So before he came to Yahweh's house, we were working for Satan. And for us to work for her, we had to be in a certain shape. So this shape is a carnal mind. What that means is that it's not a certain shape that's physical. It means that she taught us to be in that image, that carnal mind, which is enmity to Yahweh. So, and also, if you like to read more about the carnal mind, it's on the Mark of the Beast. It's on page 153. It says in the new Mark of the Beast book, it's on page 153. I don't know about the old one. So we came with this carnal mind to the house of Yahweh. So, and also in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 18 and verse 4. It says, but the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the potter's hands. So he made it again into another vessel, shaping it as it seemed best to the potter to make. So the word marred in that verse right there is the past tense for the word mar, and that's spelled M-A-R. And the definition from the American Heritage Dictionary is to inflict damage, especially disfiguring damage, to impair the soundness, perfection, or integrity of, spoil, a disfiguring mark, and lastly it says a blemish. So we were blemished in the hands of Satan, who was our initial potter. So Yahweh, as it says at the finishing of that verse, it says, so he made it again to another vessel, shaping it seemed best to the potter to make. So Yahweh reshapes us to be fit for his work, because we were working for Satan. So he reshapes us again, so we can be fit for his work. And so we have a choice to make, whether we want Yahweh or Satan to shape us. And it says in Deuteronomy 30, verse 15. You don't have to turn there, just read it for me. Deuteronomy 30, verse 15, so on page 173, it says, see, I have set before you this day life by righteousness and death by destruction. And verse 16 says, in that I command you this day to love Yahweh your Father by walking in all his ways, by keeping his laws, his statutes, and his judgments, so that you may live and multiply, and so Yahweh your Father may bless you in the land which you go in to possess. So Yahweh does not leave us hanging. He gives us the best option to choose, which is to keep His laws. And that will lead to the rewards that come after that, which will be to live and multiply. To live and multiply. So the rewards is life. And also, moving on to the last one, which is the third one. It's Yahweh allows us to be tested. So if you read Exodus 20 verse 20. Exodus 20 verse 20. It's on page 61. And it says, Moshe said to the people, do not fear, for Yahweh has come to test and prove you, so that the reverence for Yahweh will be with you, so that you do not commit sin. And there is a side note right there. It says, whether you will obey Yahweh's laws as you promised or not. So the test is to prove whether we'll obey Yahweh's laws as we promised in the baptism vow. Whether we will obey His promise, what we promised to Him or not. So we need to make right choices during our testing. But also, thanks to the Peace Solution, because we've been learning how to make right choices. So, and also, if you endure and hold fast to Yahweh through our trials and tests, we'll be rewarded. Revelation 22 verse 12. It says, and behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to give every man according as his work will be. So Yahshua is coming with the rewards to give us according to what our rewards will be. And if we kept our promise, or if we hold on to a promise, we get the reward. Or if we committed sin and went against our promise, we're gonna get the consequences. So Yahweh's calling should not be taken lightly, and also we should rejoice that Yahweh chose us to be a part of His great work in these last days. And remember, Pastor said that we need to be thankful, because there are many people out there who would like to see the place where you're sitting right now. And that's all I had. Doc, please stand.
At this time, if you all remain standing, it's my privilege and honor to introduce to you son of Yisrayl Abel, Great Deacon Abishalom Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Hope everyone's getting ready for feasts, 'cause, it's coming upon us quickly. And we all know, Yahshua's memorial is coming up soon. And I encourage everyone to go back and read about Yahshua's life, and the work that he did. And there's a lot of important, warnings and prophecies and stuff that's in that, before the feast. So, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is Yahshua's life, and how we can be like Yahshua, how we can, come to perfection like Yahshua. Because Yahshua's the testimony, of what Yahshua did. It's spread out through four different books of the Book of Yahweh. Matithia, Yachanan, Mark, Luke, and Yachanan even talks about him in Acts, and we know that he wrote the Book of Hebrews. So it was a very important work, that Yahshua did. And without Yahshua's work, this house wouldn't be able to make it. And we know he's our high priest too. So that's a very important, work that Yahshua did. Now, and the important thing to remember, with is that the testimony that was written about Yahshua, that was his testimony. But we're having a testimony written about us too. We're having, a testimony. We're having books written about us, and the whole universe, is watching, what we do. The great work that Yahweh is doing in these last days. So the question for us, is what's going to be in our book? What's going to be in our testimony? Is it going to be, that we're practicing righteousness? Or are we living a double life? Are we practicing righteousness when we're within the Sabbath Services, on the grounds, or, whenever we go out and, to Walmart or we're on Facebook and stuff like that, is going to be said, well, he was committing sin, he was getting drunk, he was doing these things, that whenever he thought no one was looking, those are the things that we're going to be judged on. Those are the things that are going to be written about us, So we need to, strive for perfection, So let's ask ourselves, are we living that double life? That even Yahshua spoke about this. If you turn over to Luke. Luke 21. Luke 21, we'll start at verse 34. He says, "So be on guard. See to it that your minds are never clouded with carousing, drunkenness, or the anxieties and worries of this life. Be vigilant, be watchful." It's the same thing, the pastor was talking about, a couple weeks ago, about how, blessed are those who will be watching, and watching means being prepared, being ready, and being, studying, showing yourself, studying to show yourself approved, to be, righteous, to, and these are the things, that it means to watch, and blessed are those people who will be watching. So it says, be on guard, see to it that your minds are never clouded with carousing, drunkenness, or the anxieties and worries of this life, so that day will not come upon you unexpectedly, for it will come like a trap on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Because of this, watch and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all those things that will come to pass. It is going to come to pass. It's got to come to pass for Yahweh's plan to be fulfilled. Be accounted worthy to escape all these things that must come or will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. So we need to strive for perfection. If you turn over to Yahshua, Yahshua 24, and if you look at verse 13, it says, so I gave you a land which you had not labored, and cities which you had not built, but on which you live. You eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. So he's showing here, this was occurring, back in the day. These guys, the children of Israel, they were worshiping these gods. They were worshiping these gods, and they didn't want to worship Yahweh, but they couldn't understand, some of the curses that were coming upon them, And here he's showing, that Yahweh brought them out of Egypt. He showed them, he gave them this land, and stuff. And he gave them the vineyards and the olive groves, but they weren't thankful for it. And in verse 14 it says, "Now therefore serve Yahweh, and serve him in complete honesty and in truth. Put away the gods, Elohim, that your fathers served on the other side of the Euphrates River, also in Egypt, and serve Yahweh." It says, "But if it seems evil to you to serve Yahweh, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods your fathers served on the other side of the river Euphrates, or the gods Elohim of the Amorites, choose your God. Choose the God you're going to serve. If it seems evil to you to serve Yahweh, if it seems evil, to practice righteousness, then choose the God you're going to serve, in whose land you now live. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh." Again, that was the statement that Yahshua made. The choice that he made, to serve Yahweh. And If you look at verse 23, now then, throw away the gods, Elohim, that are among you, and incline your minds towards Yahweh. That's what we need to do. We need to throw those gods away from us. Whatever that God is, it's stopping us from practicing righteousness, put it away from us. And wholeheartedly, serve Yahweh. And then in verse 24, it says, the people said to Yahshua, Yahweh our Father we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Yahshua made a covenant with the people that day. And they made a covenant, to Yahweh, that they would serve him. But later on they broke that. Once the leader left, they broke that covenant that was made. And I encourage you to go back and read, Matithia, Yaakov, Mark, Luke, and Yaakov, even Acts and Hebrews before the feast, and try to imagine the great work that Yahshua did. The work that he did, and try to predict that. Look at the persecution, the trials, and the tests that he went through, and how he endured those things, and how he dealt with things and the situations that he went through. Because that's a very important work. Without Yahshua's work, without Yahshua, this house wouldn't be able to function. But without us, Yahshua's work, it would be void as well. So, it's a very important work that he did. And Yahshua's memorial is coming up, so it's something we need to have on our minds. Remember, the whole universe is watching us. The whole universe is watching our actions. Watching, our actions and what we do. What we say and, the things that we do, how we treat the people around us. Like Pastor said recently, we're on that sea of glass. Yahweh's watching us. And let's go and turn over to Luke again. Luke 21. Luke 21, and if you look at verse 29, he says, and he spoke a parable to them and said, look at the fig tree and all the trees. Now when they put out new leaves, you see and you know for yourselves that summer is near. You can see this around the grounds right now. They're putting out the new leaves. You can see that summer is coming. It's near. He says, so you in the same way, when you see all these things come to pass, whenever you see these things come to pass, the wars, the fightings, all these things, the kingdom of Yahweh is near at hand. Truly I say to you, that generation will not pass away until all is fulfilled. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Okay? So, we can't live that double life. We can't straddle the fence, and think that Yahweh is not watching us. We've got to serve Yahweh with our whole heart, as we read earlier. And we've got to strive to practice righteousness. Remember, it's that practice of righteousness. It's the practice of righteousness that makes us righteous. It's that, if we practice sin, that makes us sinful. It's that practicing righteousness. Turn over to 1 Kohan 3, and if you look at verse 7, it says, little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. That practice. And he who commits sin, who practices sin, is of the devil. And the devil is sin from the beginning. The devil, Satan, is very skilled in practicing sin. For this purpose, the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whoever is begotten of Yahweh does not commit sin, for his seed remains in him, and it is not possible for him to commit sin, because he has been begotten of Yahweh. So, strive to practice righteousness. And it's the things that, whenever we think no one's looking, it's those things, that's going to be written about us. We're going to be judged on. The real test of self-control is what we do when no one's looking. So let's follow Yahshua's example. We'll reap those rewards. Quickly turn over to Revelation. Revelations 22. And if you look at verse 12, it says, and behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work will be. I'm the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Remember, we're going to be judged upon our works. We're going to be judged upon the things we've done. Blessed are those who keep his laws. Blessed are those who practice righteousness, that they might have right to the tree of life and enter into the gates in the city. Verse 15, for outside are dogs, the sorcerers, the whoremongers, the murderers, worshippers of gods Elohim, and everyone who professes to love, professes to keep the laws. Remember, keeping the laws, that's showing love to your neighbor. Okay, so everyone who professes to love, yet practices breaking the laws. Those are the people who are going to be outside. Those are the people they're going to receive that death. So let's strive to practice righteousness. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to Great Kohan Benyamin C.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. It's a beautiful Sabbath morning. Got some really, really great information, and I'm going to jump right on the loop. Let's get right back on that loop. You remember the loop 322, because we have more information to bring forth on it. And, waking up this morning, I realized that today is 325, so it's a great day for Abilene, because that's the area code, right? So you'll be able to remember that. Keep these numbers in your mind. So if you remember, we're talking about the two witnesses. We haven't left that subject. And remember, the two witnesses, new light. The gematria was 322, and we are getting a lot of new light, new information about this Abilene and the establishment. And let me get right into this. Abilene was founded in 1881. Okay, and it became the county seat in 1883. Now, both of those are significant because 100 years later exactly was when the press room was built and dedicated. And in 1983, 100 years later, the establishment of the house of Yahweh took place. As you'll notice, this is going to be significant. It is on the 32nd parallel. You need to write that number down. It's on the 32nd parallel. Let me get these points in, and as you can see, the area code is 325. That's interesting. Today's 325. And see if there's anything else I need to tell you there. The county seat before Abilene, if you know what a county seat is, where they have their county courthouse, and it's like the main, sorry, I got to get my pictures here. Okay. The county seat, the former county seat of Abilene was Buffalo Gap, believe it or not. And Buffalo Gap to this day believes that Abilene stole the county seat position from them in 1883. Here's the farm road leading to Buffalo Gap. And that's, if you'll notice, actually the street name here is Graham Street. And that's if you remember, Pastor lived in Graham. You remember that? He talked to us about it. But that's the farm road that leads into Buffalo Gap, Texas, which is just right outside of Abilene. Remember, 1881 is when it was founded. So let's look at some meanings here. 1881. And it means a royal edict, commandment, commission, decree, or law. Law, rule. And you remember this work in these last days, Zechariah 5:9 says it was sent with commandment. Sent with commandment. With a mission. And it's Yahweh that sent this witness. It's Yahweh that has done this work, that has established this work in Abilene. And if you remember Abilene, number 9 in Strong's, number 9 in Strong's means Abilene. 1881, in the Hebrew, it means to rise up against, to raise up against. And if you remember, what is the work of Israel Hawkins? It is to oppose Babylon. The opposing of Babylon, as he told us about. Remember his brother and him, Eastland, Texas, 1962, the beginning of the opposing of Babylon. We're going to be talking a lot about that in the future here, because you're going to be greatly fascinated to see all about Eastland and Rising Star and Cross Plains and how this all fit into Yahweh's plan so perfectly. Now, 1883, when the Abilene became the county seat, it's the word grass, as you can see, 1883. Now, if you remember the house of Yahweh established, we'll turn to page 57 real quick just so I can show you. This is all explained. Every single thing I've told you in all these sermons concerning the gathering in Abilene, it's all in this book right here. Every single bit of it is in this book, okay? And on page 57, it begins to talk about Isaiah 44 and what the grass means, okay? And the establishment of Abilene. And he shows here, he says, grass, Davidson shows, is the place, the courts of Yahweh's house to be present, to call together and to convoke in. You know, it's all about this gathering to Abilene, the gathering place. That's what Abilene means. It's the gathering place. And you can read about this in this book, The House of Yahweh Established. So it means grass. And it's from this word here, which is 1877. It means grass. And it means fresh grass, green, new growth, tender grass. And it's from this word here, dasha, and it means to sprout, to grow green, Remember, it's been a growing process, a development over all these years, okay, to grow green. But it also means to bring forth and to spring, and you're going to see those definitions here in a minute because it's all about Abilene, to bring to Abilene, okay? That's what Abilene means, to bring. Okay, so also 1883 in the Greek, this is interesting because in Pastor's last sermon, remember he said this is the greatest work? And remember Isaiah 2 and Micaiah 4 where it talks about, the top of the mountains, the top nation of all nations, and that we're going to be raised above all congregations. You remember that prophecy? Well, that's what 1883 means. It means on the top, above, superior to. And that means of dignity and power, but also rank. In rank. The greatest, remember the last will be first? You remember that? Okay, so let's look at a little bit of history and heritage concerning, this is from Abilene's actual website. They have a city website. And it says, a town auction was held on March 15th, 1881, and Abilene was born. The very day Pastor turned his name to Israel. Remember that? 101 years later, 101. Somebody knows what that number means, right? And Abilene was born. By the end of the next day, 317 lots were sold for the sum of that much, and the remaining lots were sold at a private sale. So March 15th and March 16th is when Abilene began. It was born. The very day that Pastor changed his name, and then the next day when it was filed in the court, where his name was changed to Yisrayl. That was brought out a few sermons ago. Now, this is also from Taylor County and Abilene's website. Notice what they know themselves. It says, the word Abilene means grassy plain. It came originally from the Bible, they said. The 3rd chapter of Luke, the name of a Mideast tetrarchy. As you remember in Luke chapter 3, it talks about Abilene being a tetrarchy. And Abilene, Pastor's been there. Some of the great Kohans went with him there. And it is in the area of Galilee. It's in the region of Galilee. That's going to become important too for you to remember as we're talking about this loop, because remember the ring road we talked about last time? A ring road is also known as a beltway, a circumferential highway, that means circle. It also means a loop or a orbital, okay? And here's an example of what they look like. That's what our loop also looks like. If I can get this thing to cooperate, because I really need to show a couple of pictures. Okay, here it goes. All right. So, all right. This is from the Abilene Reporter News, back in when Pastor was arrested. And it says, Yahweh leader Hawkins may face other charges. Fate of House of Yahweh is uncertain. Really? Well, it's uncertain to them, but it's certain to us, isn't it? The gates of hell will not prevail. Notice the picture they have here of the loop, and it shows headquarters of the house of Yahweh right there on the original stretch, right there, of Loop 322 that was originally built. That is the actual part of original loop. That's where the headquarters is. And there's our beautiful overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins. Okay. And if you remember the information that was brought last time about Texas State Highway Loop 322, and it was 5439, and if you remember, that meant circuit, roundabout. It meant around, to surround, surrounding, circular course, circumference, all those coincidental words. And it was from 5437, which means to turn about, to go around, surround. It means to circle around, all around. You get the point? Circuit, circling, okay? Well, amazingly enough, now remember, the prophet said that in Ecclesiastes, he said, believe it was Solomon, right? He said that which has been will be yet again. Remember that? And that there's nothing new under the sun. Well, let's look up the meaning of Galilee. And what does it mean? It means a circuit, a ring, circuit. So did you know you're in Galilee too? Not just Abilene, but Galilee. This road right here, there isn't anything in Abilene that doesn't have our pastor's name right on it, or that does not talk about Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, except maybe ACU or McMurray or one of those. But at the entrance of Abilene right here, you'll see this. Treadaway Boulevard, 83. Remember 83. Pastor's 83 this year. Okay, Highway 83. Remember the length of it meant Abel. That was brought out a couple sermons ago. Okay, keep all these things in your mind. It means Abel. Pastor's 83 this year. Treadaway. Let's talk about Treadaway. Treadaway, it's from this Celtic word tre, meaning homestead or settlement. And Dway is a form of David, which is still used in Wales, and the name David means beloved. Beloved. So the homestead or settlement of my beloved. Well, who's his beloved? Well, let's find out. Here's David in Hebrew, beloved one, David, 1732, a son of Yishai. And it's from 1730, right here, and it means beloved. It means beloved. Now I want to remind you of something that was brought before about, remember Times Square and the length, the mileage from Times Square to the house of Yahweh, the original sanctuary in that downtown? 1,730 miles. Beloved, my beloved. Treadaway. Would you believe? Could you believe Treadaway could mean that? Isn't that amazing? And, Treadaway is the business 83. In any town, when you have any kind of, you always have a business loop or a business road that goes through the town. And that is the main thoroughfare of Abilene. And it's talking about Yisrayl Hawkins. Man, So Galilee, here's the word here. And it means circuit, district, a circuit, a circle, a ring, okay? And it also means gold rings. That's interesting. Heard a couple speakers last week talking about some gold socks. And the etymology of gold, remember, was 228. Well, if you remember on 228:15, me and the Great Kohan talked about this gold placemat right here. and how we came to the conclusion that when you flip it over, when you go to Revelation 2:17 and you count 30, remember the 30-year anniversary, and it comes to Revelation 3:18, and he says, I counsel you to buy gold. Revelation 3:18, what was the date last week? Yeah, that's right. See, there's no coincidences. Everything is done. Yahweh is in full control of this situation. Do you believe that, house of Yahweh? Now, you got to keep that gold ring in your mind, because there's more to that. I don't know if I'll get to it today. But do you remember that Samuyl, the prophet Samuyl, pastors taught us that he always had a circuit that he went on. Okay? A circuit. And here's Samuyl's circuit. Gilgal, Ramah. And Ramah was where he was actually stationed and located. I believe I have that written there. That's his home. That's where he homesteaded, right here in Ramah. Mizpah, Mikbesh, Bethel. That was his circuit that he went on yearly, and he went around teaching, the prophet Samuyl. By the way, on this particular placemat, I'm going to set you up for next time. Notice Pastor actually talked about this in his last sermon. He says, I was standing there with an elder in front of the sanctuary. If you remember, he talked a little bit about it. And here he is standing with one of the elders. And on that sign, it says, Yahweh is our Savior, Isaiah 43:11. Now, I'm going to have to set you up for the next time. Let's see, here we go. Okay. Let's look at a couple numbers here. I just took exactly what was on the sign, and here's what came up. 2981 and 1716. Okay, so you're ready, right? All right. Let's go to the first definition of 2981. It's Yabul, and it means to produce. It means crops, fruit, increase, and yield. And it's from this word right here, Yabal. Yabal. Well, that should ring a bell. Anybody remember what that word meant? House of Yahweh established. Y'all remember that? Yabal, the root word of the word Abel. Amazing coincidence? But it also means this. It's from this word, it means to bring. To bring. And if you'll read the House of Yahweh established, on page 70, that's what it's talking about. To bring in the people, gathering the people to Abilene, to Abel. The place that Yahweh established in these last days, the only place. Do you not believe Yahweh? Well, I know you do. I know you do. And I know those tuned in right now. And pretty soon, 2 billion people are going to come here. Do you believe that? I don't have time to get into... I'm just going to give you one scripture before I go. Turn to Revelation 7 real quick. I'm going to set you up for next time. I'm going to hopefully make your mouth water a little bit. Revelation 7:1 on page 975, it says, After these things I saw 4 Malachim standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds. Hey, did anybody notice how windy it was on 3:23? Did you know that 3:23? Did you know that? I'm just going to warm you up a little bit. 3:23 was actually 12:24 on the calendar. And if you remember 12:24, the Roman December 24th, it was very windy that night. Y'all remember that? 12:24? And then on 12:24, if you notice, here's the 12th new moon, began on February 28th. That's the first day. And then 23 days later, 12:24 on our calendar, and it was windy again. I wonder why. Let's look. I'm going to set you up. After these things, I saw 4 Malachim standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds. Holding the 4 winds. The winds, okay, it says, so that the wind should not blow on the earth nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another Moloch. That's word number 32. Remember the 32nd parallel. That word Moloch means messenger, ascending or rising from the east. From the east, having the seal of the living Father, and he cried with a loud voice. If you remember, Pastor talked about that being Jacob. Okay? Think about the four winds. Think about the wind being held back. Think about the winds of war. Okay? Get ready for the next time, because we're going to be talking about rising star, where Jacob lived in Rising Star, Texas, in Eastland County. Okay? Get ready for the next time, because Yahweh's really going to continue to just pour on this golden oil, this beautiful new light that he's been giving us. And at this time, it's been a pleasure and an honor to speak with you. And it's my honor and opportunity now to turn it over to the Great Kohan Ilya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Of course, as we've proceeded for the last few weeks, the news keeps getting grimmer and grimmer. The destruction keeps growing. President Trump, if you've seen in the news, of course, in the last few weeks, has been saying that he felt that his phone had been tapped at Trump Towers. Pastor brought out 10 years ago that they were tapping phones and listening, and now the CIA has come out. RT did a special on it saying, listen, we've hacked every smartphone for the last 10 years. So he's not the only one that's been hacked. Welcome to America. That's what it's like. And then remember what the house of Yahweh has brought out about marijuana, how it prohibits the ability to learn. It actually stops the ability to learn. Well, there's another government that is now promoting and actually pushing for this medical marijuana, and it's the government of Israel. They've just approved it, and they're pushing it, and they're talking about other countries such as China, the European Union, pushing these things on a large scale. And of course, with doing this, it's not healing anyone. If your body hurts, if you have a pain, it's telling you there's something wrong. Smoking marijuana will not help you fix it, of course, but it will prohibit your learning. It will stop the mind from being able to perceive what, of course, the house of Yahweh is teaching. And then, of course, we see floods, we see the landslides, mudslides, even in Peru. That country is under severe devastation. Many of the roads are destroyed due to, of course, with these landslides, you have drought for a period, then you have a lot of rain that comes through, and then the ground cannot process it. So you get these huge mudslides, as we've seen in California, but the country of Peru are in utter devastation right now. And then drought. Of course, we see drought, disease, and famine. We see this a lot taking place. Africa is the country making the news, or the continent making the news more than any other place right now. It's not the only place where we see this, but it is taking the news. Uganda is suffering. Of course, everyone's saying that someone needs to do something. And as they're doing that, one of the countries that Scott Paley on CBS he gets into is talking about South Sudan. Now, if you remember, South Sudan just separated from the country of Sudan 6 years ago. It is the newest country in our world. And the people there, it's very underdeveloped. There's no development really that's been processed through that country. And the people there are literally starving to death. And they're dropping food, $1.5 million worth of food a day. And that sounds like a lot until you consider how much a bomb costs that we're dropping over in other countries. Now, we'll drop a lot of bombs, but these people in Sudan are starving to death. Well, what do they have, and what does everyone else want? Well, this country where people are starving to death, they set on a huge oil reserve. Now, you would think if somebody cared, they would help that country develop their wealth so they could take care of themselves. Instead, they're letting them die off. Now, there's a lot of refugees, and we see them coming out, even Mosul, which is in Iraq. Many hundreds of thousands of refugees, and of course, they're searching for peace. Remember what Cain was told, you'd search for peace and find none. Well, these refugees are searching for peace. They're not finding it yet, but they're on their way. They don't know that, but they're on their way to this house of peace, and that's what we're training for. We're training so when these people come and they're already on their way, it's not a question of when will they leave. The question is when will they arrive, and arrive in abundance. That's what our minds have to be set for. But as this starvation is taking place, it's also leading to the deformity of children, as in Yemen. And I want to tell you there are some very graphic pictures of these children, of one child being burnt in a bombing, showing the little burning of the skin of a child as they're trying to work on it. Children's starvation. And it amazes me, and it should amaze you, that no one is stepping up to help put an end to this. This war and devastation that we see only grows week by week, year by year. No one is doing anything but the house of Yahweh. That is the only place on this earth that is crying out, saying peace through education, because this peace will never come through war. Also, North Korea. Now, this is something to watch closely, because North Korea recently launched 5 missiles. Of course, they said that they were trying to hit the air bases or the armed force bases in Japan of the United States. Now, the thing that's really alarming is the United States noticed that North Korea had launched a missile, but they didn't notice they launched 5, which means with all this technology that the United States has, there still can be something that takes place that they don't readily see. They just noticed 1, but there was 5 that was launched. And of course, our new U.S. Secretary of State, which is Rex Tillerson, he says that the United States must take action against North Korea. And if you remember, President Obama, one of his last leaving messages of the White House was to President Donald Trump, saying you're going to have to deal with North Korea. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, China is calling for a calming down of all involved, because China is going to play a huge role in this. But President Trump, as our Secretary of State, is saying that North Korea should have no nuclear weapons. Our president is saying that the United States should have a nuclear weapon facility that is unrivaled to anyone else's. So if they're so bad, why do we need something that's so great if they're so bad? If no one else should have them, why should we have the greatest? Of course, it's talking about ruling with force. And then Damascus, they call out for the UN this last week to help stop the massacres. It may seem like, since we don't see it every week now, about the United States and other countries bombing Syria, they're still bombing Syria. They just did again this week. Still heavy bombing going on in and around Damascus even. And of course, Damascus is appealing to the UN to have someone stop it. But that's like asking the arsonist to help you put out a fire. Of course, they're not going to help stop it. All of these things, remember, as Pastor has brought, everything is planned and is going according to a plan. And then Israel, actually, they're getting involved bombing Syria, and they actually threaten to destroy Syria's air defense system. Why? Because as Israel was bombing Syria, Syria launched an air defense missile to try to shoot down one of the jets. And they said, if you do it again, we'll destroy your defense system. So I guess they're supposed to sit by and just be bombed. Think of this mentality behind this. They're trying to protect themselves, and of course this war will never protect them, but as they try, the more they do it, the more attacks they receive, the more threats they receive. And then of course in London this last week, and what we want you to get from this is understanding that these attacks, this is why it's so important for us to stay out of the world, to not go on vacations, to not go out visiting, to not go hanging out in places we should not be in. Another case in London where people walking down the street, and of course the man decides to run through a group of people, then he gets out of his car and starts stabbing people. If you're someone that's caught in the midst of that, there's no protection for you. Of course, the house of Yahweh has warned us in advance to not be part of these things, but to see how easy these things can occur. And then something very interesting with President Erdogan. Remember, he is the president of Turkey. Last week and this week also, he is lashing out against the EU. Now remember, it was just a few months ago Turkey was seeking to be a part of the EU. Also remember, Turkey is where Patriarch Bartholomew, who was the head of the Pan Council, the 10 kings, that is where he lives. He also refers to himself as the Patriarch of Constantinople and New Rome, which is very interesting the way he titles himself. And of course, they're saying Turkey is in disagreements. They're referring to Turkey, or they're referring to the EU as the Nazis of World War II. And if they could get by, they would have concentration camps and they would have gas chambers. That is what Turkey is saying about the EU. And of course, with all of these things going on, Pope Francis said this last week that the EU is in risk of dying. And remember, that is one of the 4 horns that set on the golden altar. So be careful in watching these things and pay attention, but also take the warning of what our jobs is to learn to teach for these billions to come. If we could please play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, more people fleeing for their lives as wars drive them from their homes. Also, the food shortage in Yemen worsens as more people there now face starvation. And could China be the door for the U.S. into North Korea? Well, these stories and more, but first, grab your phone. We have something we'd like to tell you. Well, WikiLeaks continues to bring to light new information that the U.S. government would like to keep secret, and yes, it has to do with your phone. For the second time this month, the website exposed CIA-related information and says it has much more to follow.
Interesting. Well, the whistleblower published its most recent article under the name Dark Matter, which describes some of the tools used by the CIA to hack into Apple products. The article says that the CIA has been able to hack into iPhones for as long as a decade, including the ability to remotely download and upload files and apps onto your iPhone. Well, this is the second CIA-related leak that the website has made this month, and it promises much more.
Well, the tool that has drawn the biggest attention is called Night Skies. WikiLeaks stresses that this has been around since 2008 and is expressly designed to be physically installed onto factory-fresh iPhones. In other words, Katan, the CIA has been infecting the iPhone supply chain since at least 2008.
Wow. Well, the spyware comprises of three components, an implant, a listening post, and a post-processing program. Well, the implant will run undetected on the phone once it has been physically installed, allowing the CIA to monitor the phone for activity, including YouTube videos and browser history.
Once the information is collected, the Night Skies software sends the information to a pre-configured listening post, which is like a Dropbox for the data to be processed. Now, Night Skies has been described as powerful because it can access your address book, the SMS, conversations, and call logs, all for the purpose of uploading it to the CIA servers. Now, the agency could also execute commands on the iPhone remotely and download or upload any files onto the device. So it's quite a leeway there, what they can do.
Oh, yeah, pretty scary. Well, after exposing the CIA hacking capabilities by WikiLeaks, the so-called Vote 7, a number of tech giants, including Apple, said most of the described backdoors have already been dealt with through updates. Despite the 9,000 documents revealed by WikiLeaks as part of their CIA exposure, this is only 1% of what those behind the website claim they have in their possession.
Well, the smell of money is not the only thing in the air, as the Israeli government gave the go-ahead in February to legislation that would allow the export of medical-grade cannabis. Now, just in time for the Canatech conference in Tel Aviv, which showcases medical marijuana. Yuval Landschaft, with the Medical Cannabis Unit, the Israeli Health Ministry, said, "This is a real unique breakthrough which we have now here in Israel, and we are willing to share it. We are willing to share it," he said, "with all the countries."
Well, banking on the fact that other countries will want it, Israel is ready to produce it, kind of a supply and demand thing. U.S. lawyer Matthew Ginder, representing cannabis firms, said the medical marijuana industry is much larger than the U.S., and there's so much going on outside of the U.S. and in foreign countries, and the acceptance of medical marijuana throughout the world and opportunities that present themselves with the change in policy. So it's definitely going to grow from here.
Israel's cannabis producers have their sights set on a $50 billion, and you heard that right, Kohan, $50 billion global market by the year 2025. Now, in the last year alone, $100 million is estimated to have gone into the patents, agro-tech startups, and firms developing delivery devices such as inhalers. Now, all of this has become very tempting to foreign investors. As the applications for medical marijuana grow, revenues are seen climbing into the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. So you see there pretty much the push behind all this.
Yeah, they're seeing green in more than one way.
That's right.
Well, as a side note, Jeff, the U.S. Is projected, the U.S., of course, only the U.S. is projected to consume around $20 billion worth of medical marijuana by 2020, only a mere 3 years away.
That's right, and that's where Israel is hoping to get into that market.
That's right.
Well, rains have been falling on the country of Peru for weeks now. Along with them has come severe flooding and landslides. The flooding has displaced over 110,000 people, 150 bridges have collapsed, and almost 2,000 kilometers of roads are now unusable. The country's president visited the hardest hit areas along the Yisrayl River and told reporters they will be making plans to create channels for the river to prevent it from overflowing in the future.
Well, at the peak of the storm, eyewitnesses said the floodwaters were up to 1 meter high and carried away everything from homes to shops, animals, and pets. While the capital of Lima, which is in Peru, of course, is seeing the water begin to subside, the northern part of the country continues to be battered with rain.
Well, Uganda was already a country in need, but a new report published by the World Food Program and the Ugandan government paints an even bleaker picture for the East African nation. Now, the report indicates a new weather pattern is threatening to increase food insecurity for the country. The official figures show the drought conditions in 2010 and 2011 caused economic losses of $470 million. Now, those losses were specifically pertaining to food crops, cash crops, and livestock.
Well, the WFO country director spoke to the press about the situation, saying Kamunda is the most food insecure region in Uganda due to the combined impacts of high levels of poverty, low human development, and unfavorable climate and weather conditions. Officials are saying the country needs $406 million to alleviate effects of climate change over the next 5 years, but the cost of doing nothing is estimated to be between $3 to $6 million.
Well, starvation is not just an issue for Uganda. Other areas of Africa are being hit hard as well. Now, let's turn now to YPN's Larry McGee, who has our story on food insecurity on the resource-rich continent of Africa. Larry, what's going on in that region?
Grabbing headlines this week is the newly formed nation of South Sudan, which is seeing many of its citizens flee the country as a result of escalating violence. Over 2 million refugees are said to have come out of the nation in search for safety, while humanitarians are reported to be working to provide food aid to 5 million still within the country and suffering starvation. Planes airdrop much-needed supplies to destitute residents. One plane load is reportedly capable of feeding 1,600 people for 30 days, but that is still insufficient, given some towns have populations of up to 50,000 people, all in need of assistance. The South Sudan emergency response is reportedly costing $1.5 million per day. Crowds gather to await airdrops, but some are still returning home empty-handed. Ration cards are being distributed ahead of each drop to try to ensure equitable distribution and to also provide a sense of assurance to awaiting residents in hopes of staving off fighting. Inside the crisis is one painful story after another inside the nation, which has been boiling with conflict since the 1950s. More than 2 million Sudanese residents were killed during its civil war. The U.S. was ultimately responsible for negotiating the separation of South Sudan amid great hopefulness and much excitement for the future. Those bright prospects have all crumbled as a result of infighting over oil, the ripple effect of which has been the severe famine, which most analysts are now calling man-made. This is because the resource-rich land is 90% farmable, but only 4% is currently being cultivated as a result of warfare. Stirring up thoughts of the crisis in Rwanda, the nation of South Sudan is being referred to as a killing field, with many of its citizens destitute and literally starving to death. Death is having its heyday not just in Africa, however. Lives are being lost all across the East, and there are cries of media apathy concerning widespread civilian bloodshed in locations such as Mosul. Graphic images of tragedies are leaking out and causing horror and concern as the American-backed Iraqi army continues its advance into western Mosul with the alleged intent of liberating the city from ISIS insurgents. The fierce fighting between government forces and ISIS mercenaries is causing a flow of refugees numbering in the thousands, a tragic phenomenon which media outlets are interestingly entitling the Mosul Exodus. Commentators say the mass movement is one of the largest battlefield exoduses of modern times, with almost 250,000 refugees fleeing for safety. The circumstances in the region are being described as desperate and brutal. Analysts report that everyone who sees an opportunity makes a run for it. And it is not just ISIS that they are running from. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Tom Jeff, back to you.
Well, it sounds like they're really being hit hard with the lack of food, which is, of course, affecting them in many other ways. Hopefully, things will change in the future for them. Well, as we continue, Yemen has been hit hard from the ongoing warring. Children seem to be suffering the most as a result of this. In fact, one little report came out about a young child, Uday Faisal, who was only 5 months old, and at that age he weighed a mere 5.3 pounds as a result of malnutrition. Well, because of the dire situation that he was in and being so malnourished, Faisal died as a result. Well, over 300,000 children in Yemen face suffering death from malnutrition, while millions of others suffer from a lack of health care or clean water.
North Korea did what it labeled as simulated attack against U.S. air bases in Japan. Now, the U.S. had initially detected one launch, but later found out it was actually 5 missiles simultaneously launched by North Korea. Now, the first one failed, but the others reached their maximum range of 600 miles and crashed into the Sea of Japan. Although the missiles weren't nuclear capable or very accurate, they were small and mobile and caught the U.S. intelligence by surprise. North Korea fired them in a way to confuse missile defense systems, and of course apparently it worked because they thought only one, but there was actually 5.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Well, this test falls on the heels of an upcoming military exercise between the U.S. and South Korea. These drills are always met with North Korea acting out angrily, and of course U.S. officials expect to see more missile launches in response. China responded to the launches when the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hao Chunying said in a statement, "The current situation of the peninsula is very tense. It is a touch-and-go situation, so we urge relevant parties to exercise calmness and restraint to avoid mutual provocations and adventurous actions." Now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that any selfish action in the peninsula would only complicate the situation. They've also called for an investigation into the latest missile test by North Korea. Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had his first visit to Tokyo in an effort to create stability in the region. He stated in an address the attempt to bring North Korea to denuclearization has failed, so a different approach is required. But, of course, he left the meeting without offering any other details as to how. He made this trip a little over a week after that recent launch of those missiles by North Korea. And even though those missiles fell short of their targeted range, a UN report showed that the North has significantly increased its technical know-how.
The U.S. has recently sped up an anti-missile defense system in South Korea, which China feels will be used against them. And since China is North Korea's only friend in the region, the U.S.'s Rex Tillerson needs them to help influence North Korea's leaders, but that relationship between the U.S. and China is off to a rocky start. Now, Tillerson said that the U.S. will be talking with China regarding North Korea and its nuclear program, so they're hoping that they're going to be able to help them out. We'll see.
Will the Trump administration keep up the policy of a world without nuclear missiles? Christopher Ford, the U.S. Senior Director for Weapons of Mass Destruction, said that the administration is reviewing policies, including whether the goal of a world without nuclear weapons is a realistic objective. On the other hand, U.S. President Trump has already said that he wants the U.S. to have an unrivaled nuclear arsenal. So it doesn't look like that policy is really going to be pursued too hardly.
Well, Syria's foreign ministry has called on the UN Security Council to stop what it calls the massacres caused by the U.S. coalition in the Arab country. Now, Syria, in letters to the UN, has condemned 2 U.S.-led airstrikes, including one on a school in Homanshur near Raqqa City. They said that this was a new series of aggressions launched on Syria's sovereignty and on the safety of its territories in the name of combating terrorism. Now, they also expressed regret that the UN remained silent in the face of these attacks. The attack on the school left 30 people dead.
Well, Israel has threatened to destroy Syria's defense system if it is used against them. These remarks were made after Syria said that it fired several missiles at Israeli warplanes when Israel conducted a series of airstrikes around the ancient city of Palmyra.
London has been struck with yet another terrorist attack, leaving 4 people dead and 20 people wounded. A driver plowed a car in a group of pedestrians and stabbed a police officer. The attacker was shot to death by police. The driver sped along a bridge, hitting dozens before plowing into Parliament, setting off a frenzy of chaos. Now, the driver drove through Parliament security and stabbed a police officer before being shot to death by other security officers.
Well, the Turkish president, Erdogan, has given Europe a tongue lashing, saying that it is anti-Islam and anti-Turk. Erdogan said, of course, speaking to Europe, if you strike at us, we will strike back. We'll dish out the exact same treatment that we are given, and from now on, no foreign agents or any European countries will be allowed to act in our country, neither individuals or institutions. He also said that none of the European deals will threaten them, speaking of threaten Turkey, and he said in his conclusion of his statement that it's over. It's pretty much over.
Well, Erdogan didn't stop there. He also compared European leaders to Nazis, saying that they would revive gas chambers and concentration camps if they weren't ashamed, and that is their mentality. Now, Martin Schulz, the leader of the German Social Democratic Party, said, "We cannot accept Erdogan inciting hate with Nazi comparisons." Now, the Turkish foreign minister said the European Union and several European countries are bringing back the atmosphere of World War II. The same racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism.
Wow. Well, while this world is one at war, and famines and, of course, disasters are overtaking mankind everywhere, safety, trust, and peace is nowhere to be found except in one place, and by only one way, and taught by only one person, and that person is Yisrayl Hawkins, the one sent to mankind to bring the message of peace, the prophesied destruction, and what you can do to save yourself and family from what the governments are calling mutually assured destruction. Well, to find out more, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copies of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yisrael Yahweh.com, www.YisraelHawkins.com, or www.Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. For any emails, you can email at info@yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen. And once again, we'd like to remind you of 2 study programs that are on the market at this time. The first one being the Yisrael Says program. You can learn more by going to www.yisraelsays.com. And the second one is the Ask Yisrael program. And find out about that program by going to www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere, folks. Up next, the one prophesied to bring forth the message of peace for all mankind, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.
At this time, if everyone will please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the Great Kohan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Go ahead. Hey, Yahweh. We got a crowd. Look at this. The feast must have begun. Oh boy, this is great. the gathering is growing. There you go. You may be seated. I shouldn't take so much time with that we got so much to cover. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I've really been pushing to get more in and more in on these weekly Sabbaths, and we got so much information that you need, and I know we're rushing through it. The things this morning, I said a person can't keep up with this. You're going to have to get you a pencil and paper and take notes while you're here during services, and then study them in the quietness of your own bungalow. You know, I don't know if you noticed the news or not, but what we started here a few years ago, what Yahweh got me into when He brought me to Abilene. By the way, in Graham, I forgot to tell the elder this, but that's where it should have started. My brother and I built a brush arbor in Graham. We had a brush arbor just out south of Graham. Now, this was after college. I don't know the year, but this is after we got out of college, and we pastored some churches for a while, and then we decided, this wasn't going to work. We couldn't get churches. You couldn't go into a house of God and bring anybody out alive, And we found that out, and I said, we've got to go out on our own. We've got to bring this on our own. We can't promote what they're doing here. So we moved on out, and we had this brush arbor going, which there was quite a few converts that worked with us for several years after that. And a part of them came from the Romney group and to the brush arbor meeting in Graham. And then that's when we were brought to the Cross Plains and Rising Star that I was telling the great elder about. And when we was working out this sermon this morning, but there's so much more that goes with this that you need to know the history of to see that Yahweh is involved in all your moves. Right now you're sitting on this sea, which means he can see of glass, which is crystal clear to him. He can see crystal clear all of your moves, all of your actions, your words, what your tongue is doing to either build or destroy his work. And you've got to see this in the Scripture, but showing this in the numbers, how it took place, and I had no idea at that time that he had all this written in advance. He had all of this written in advance that he would show us later, of course, as he's showing us now how all of this is taking place. But think of the mind, the great mind that Yahweh has, and is able to put this down thousands, millions of years in advance, what he's going to do with mankind in order to bring forth this kingdom. It's beyond imagination. It's mind-blowing to us. There's no way we can understand how he could do it. He's given us a glimpse into the future mind or potential that he's given mankind. He's given us a glimpse of it in what I've explained to you about the subconscious mind and what it's capable of. It doesn't forget anything. Right now, whether you know it or not, every movement, every wrinkle in my hand, every scar from the last fall. Yeah, I had one. I was racing a bunch of boys that thought they was going to outrun me. One of them run in front of me and tripped me. Someone asked me what ailments I had, and I said, I don't have any that I know of. And I said, oh, yeah, I do too. I said, I can't stay up with the Pope Mobile sometimes when I'm running backwards. Otherwise, I outrun them, but running backwards, I have a little bit of trouble now. Anyway, this new moon now, the new moon, don't forget, is it this Tuesday? Come on, think now. Is it this Tuesday night? Now watch Monday night, okay? Be sure and watch Monday night. The feast, we got 15 days. If we see the new moon right. Purple, you need to get your orders in. You really need to show Yahweh you're serious about being pure. And that's what that word actually means, pure Paul. The Brush Arbor meeting in Graham was I don't know how long we had that, but I think probably a year or so before we came on in this direction. Yahweh brought us on in this direction. And as you can see, and we'll have more on this Graham, I'll guarantee you that. We'll work on that. And but the cross planes and the rising star, I know I haven't thought of all of it to give to the ones I got working on this, but it will come. 325. I've got something here. That date is when Constantine also in 325 did his damage to the work of Yahweh. And I think I lost it. But anyway, I wasn't prepared to bring it anyway, so I'll wait till... Oh, here it is, right here. Let's see. The Savior's teachings were significant. The Savior's teachings were significantly altered in 325 years after his birth. 325 years after his birth, says Yisrayl Hawkins in New Article. And that's today, right? 325? 325, I think. Well, that's a blessing. And, of course, do I need to cover any more of that? No. Praise Yahweh. The Yahweh's kingdom, the complexity of Yahweh's kingdom. The complexity is what you're seeing in these numbers and what you're seeing in Scripture. We have an article here. I want you to see the nations here. Now, each one of these represents a nation. Each one of these people, now these are leaders of nations, and I could get it to where you could see the faces, but I can't. But these nations right here, it's lined up behind the Pope. They show their loyalty to the Pope. And you've got to remember now that the Pope is representing, he's being told what to do by the Vatican. The Vatican is a very complex organization, very powerful organization. You need to get this now. You need to pay attention. It's a very complex organization. It's reaching into the households of everybody on the face of the earth in one way or another. It came from Yada, who holds the keys of lawgiver. Lawgiver for the entire world. That's shown to you in Genesis 49:10. Genesis 49:11 is us with Yahshua, shown in that same chapter in the last day. Yada is trying by force. You remember Yahshua said force is not going to be a part of his kingdom. It's never been a part of Yahweh's kingdom. Yahweh demands unity for his kingdom. He requires unity, or you simply won't be there unless you are in unity with him. He's not going to force you to be there. He'll let you die if that's what you want to do. But if you want to be a part of this kingdom is the only thing that's going to last forever. These other kingdoms are destroying themselves. They're dying. They're falling. It was just pointed out to me here by the great Kohan Eliyahu Hawkins that this Pope Francis, you risk dying. Well, of course, that's one of the horns. That's one of the horns of the golden altar, and I don't want to start crying, so that's all I'm going to say. But that's one of the horns that's being chopped off at this time. Yes, it is dying. The whole setup is collapsing upon itself. You know, when we were traveling, seeing the dignitaries years ago, and we witnessed all of them. But we spent some time in Paris seeing the museums and the Ivory Tower, and it was very interesting in reading this tower and how it was put together, how it was built, because the sheer weight of that tower, unless it was actually built perfectly, if it wasn't built the way it is, the weight of it would destroy it. And they talked about the engineer that got this actually got the idea from the study that Yahweh put when he created birds and the structure that he put in the bird's wing. It's very light, very skillfully used by the birds. But if it wasn't constructed the way it is, the bird, if it was too heavy, couldn't fly. But the way it's made, it's strong. It's very strong, the way he made it. Very light, very maneuverable. And he got this idea of how this thing was made and why it didn't collapse when that bird was putting so much pressure on it to stay up and or take off and fast and so forth. And that's how that ivory tower was built on the same construction, but by this engineer that got it from Yahweh. He didn't know he got it from Yahweh, but he did. Well, this tower that Yada has built by force, it failed in the very beginning, and its failure was shown throughout the Holy Scriptures by the prophets, because Yahweh had a prophet in just about every generation, or the writings there to go by. And then all of that was rejected, of course, and Yahweh said, seal it up now. I'm going to take it, let it be taken away from you totally, but I'm going to tell you in advance what this tower, what's going to bring it down, what's going to chop these horns off, these horns of force. These horns of force that Yada has built from the days of Nimrod. Nimrod set up schools to teach this force. The force used was their armies. They created armies. Then they created cities in different locales so that the army could take in tribute. And they'd go and take in this tribute from the city and bring it back to this Catholic church. They bring it back to Yada. And of course, when they were taken down to Egypt, these 12 men, when they were taken into Egypt, Yahweh gave them Egypt. If you just study the Scriptures, don't pay any attention to Christian preachers, study the Scriptures and you will see they took over Egypt. Yahweh gave them everything in Egypt. The only thing that was over Yosef was Pharaoh. Everything else was under his care and guidance. And he did what he well pleased, and everything he did turned to blessings. But it wasn't theirs. It belonged to the crown. Moshe said, "Come with me. Yahweh will give you laws that will heal your diseases." They were like America at that time, having thousands and thousands of diseases and no answers for them. "Come with me, I'll give you a land that belongs to you, flowing with milk and honey." That is the words of righteousness. and of course they thought the rivers had honey in them, and the milk came from the stores. All you had to do is go buy a bottle. That's what the way they took it. That's the ignorance of the Catholic God worshippers. Well, Yada, in trying by force, deception, complex maneuverings, this is going on all the time with this group right here that I just showed you. They wouldn't be following the Pope if they knew that this group right here, they wouldn't be following the Pope if they knew what we know and what we can see. How come we can see this crumbling and they can't? The fact is they see it, they do see it crumbling, and they're announcing it in this article, but they think they can heal it with more force and destruction, killing people. This is Yada's ideal, taught to them in the Nimrod system. The school called Nimrod, which means terror. It means terrorize those people, make them do what you want them to do, force them into it. The Vatican has its tentacles in every nation on earth today. The ones that are resisting, they're the ones the war is being made against. The 7 nations that was predicted to be taken over, I told you that many years before these wars started in Afghanistan, Iraq, there were 7 nations that a general actually came out and told us about, and that's written in our books. Well, this complex maneuvering of people, and this is what this article shows. The Pope has condemned the rise of nationalism, and now that can mean anything, of course, and of course what he means, but he doesn't say this outwardly here, is that the Muslims, anyone who is not Catholic, this is the rise of these powers that he is condemning here. An anti-immigrant populism in Europe, and has urged the EU has urged EU countries to show unity, to show them unity. Now, they know they need unity. And get this, because they know they need it, this is what Yahweh requires in His kingdom, but He requires you to be at unity with, do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Don't be deceiving. Come to my house and get instruction every Sabbath day. Come 3 times a year and keep a full week to me. And I will give you instruction in what you need to do about each situation. Then Yahweh proves that He's right by saying, this move that you're making right now is going to bring this. Well, I'm telling the Pope right now that all of these nations here are going to fall. The EU, yes, it's being chopped off, as you can see. That's one of the horns of the 4 powers that Daniel saw. It was shown much earlier than that in Genesis 49, their moves and how they were going to do and how much trouble it was going to cause. The people, of people against people. They maneuver the nations against the nations. When the Pope goes to visit someone, like he's going to see Egypt, if you remember when Pope Benedict went to Egypt, the trouble started. And I mean a big uproar. And they were trying to get the Muslims out of office. They were trying to force democracy. The Pope is saying now he's blaming the West. He's blaming the West. This is what Hitler did. Hitler was, they are against us. They are against us. That was his line of speech. In every speech he gave, we've got to overcome them. We have to overcome them. Or they'll take us in and they'll run us down, and this will be, they'll bully us and do this, that, and the other. Well, of course, when Benedict went to Egypt, then right away the war started. The trouble began. Well, it's somewhat quietened down now, so Pope Francis now intends to go back in now and say, this is what you've got to do. Pope Francis carries orders from the Vatican. And that's what he does to each nation he visits. And if you'll just watch when he visits a nation, there's a reason. And right behind it, if they don't do what he tells them to do, things start taking place in their nation. That's how ISIS was born. And now it's become a butchering machine, and it's fighting back. Well, this complex thing that this kingdom that Yahweh has going, he's the ruler of it, the leader of it, and he maneuvers the people. Murdering those who will not pay tribute. That's what the Roman army was invented to do. The Roman army is the one that came out that Yahweh predicted. This one is going to be the world ruling kingdom. And then it will split, and others will rise up. These 4 will rise up. That's your quartet today. And of course, one of the quartet in Revelation 6 is shown to take peace from the earth. One of the quartet did. He took peace from the earth. And now the Pope is condemning that person, that quartet member, saying, you were trying to force your democracy on these people instead of forcing the religion, the Catholic religion. What you should have done was get these people to be Catholic instead of trying to force your democracy. Your democracy is not like the Vatican's democracy. This is where Barack Obama and the Catholic Church crossed. Barack Obama was actually wanting to bring peace. He still is. Well, those who won't pay tribute now, that's taxes, or they call it tithe, they call it taxes, but it's got to be paid, and then they, if you don't pay it, they have you under this huge machine that says, okay, if you won't pay it, we're going to sanction everything you got. First thing we'll do is freeze your bank accounts. How will that do? They can do it. Well, Malachi Martin showed the leading men in this. Leading men, one of them just died, Rothschild, after 7 heart transplants. Well, they thought the doctors could save him, man. He's got all the money, you know. I mean, this is one of the men that Malachi Martin talked about and said, these are the men with the money who can throw around thousands, millions, billions of dollars, and their will be done. They can say what nation stands and what nation falls. So he showed you right then who's working out this stuff. It's the Vatican, with the rich men in the Vatican. They control the money and they control the activities of this kingdom that Yada, Genesis 49:10, is the lawgiver of that kingdom. Tribute or taxes, but also works. It includes activities that the Pope is going to Egypt to say, you do this right now. The problem is, in the past, the Muslims have seen what they got into by giving in. They won't go to that religion. They know enough about that religion to know that it's bringing the people down, it's causing diseases. This is what they don't want. And they argue this all the time. We don't want to be like the West. You know, Israel was saying that for years. The first time I went to the nation, Israel, and started testifying to the dignitaries there, the archaeologists, the schools, the colleges, we did a lot of testifying. We did a lot of preaching in that nation. And we kept this up for years. I can't even think, but I wrote it. You'll have to read it. But the archaeologists that work with us, that work with me in the work that I was doing on the Temple Mount, which is somewhere modeled here, he's dead now, but he helped a lot. One night when we were in his home in Jerusalem and going over some of this stuff that I was wanting to bring out and wanting to get the truth, the foundation, all the information on before I brought it, we got to talking seriously, and he did understand. He understood why I was there. He said, I can see that you're on lasting mission. That's the way he put it. I can see that you're on a lasting mission. And I said, yes, it's prophesied if you care to look into it. And he said, I'd like that. And that's how we ended the conversation. Well, if you'd have been there, you'd have been impressed with this man and his wife. His wife served us, but she came out with veils, set the food in front of us, quickly disappeared, like Abraham's wife Sarah. And of course, I thought, this is really wonderful what I'm seeing here. And we talked about that, and he said, we don't want to be like the West. And at that time, they didn't want their televisions to go in that direction because they knew that the West was being taught by the television set from Hollywood. And they saw the damage it was being done there in Israel. So they were like what you're seeing in the Muslims today. The Muslims have a certain amount of holiness, and Daniel said that Yada is going to go against every form of righteousness. Now, they've made up their minds to worship gods. They've made up their minds that they're not going to serve Yahweh, they're going to serve their gods. They are fully convinced in their minds that they'll live forever, and every Mason has to swear that they believe in the immortal soul in mankind. So this teaching coming from Yada, the hills of Yada, the 7 hills of Yada, this teaching is in the United States and being run by these same lawyers, Masons, so forth, right here in the United States. So you can see how the Vatican is reaching here into the schools, into the churches. And for some reason, did you notice that the churches, none of the religions will believe the scriptures when he says the soul that sins is going to die? They don't believe that. And you can't be a part of their organization. And that's what I proved to my son, my brother-in-law, back when I was, I think, 18 or 19 years old. And I showed him from his own Bible. He threw his own Bible against the wall. He got so angry with me. I spoke harshly then. I don't do that anymore. Yeah, I do a little. I know. Praise Yahweh. But from this now, Yada's doing, you can see the same maneuverability today that was taught in the schools of Nimrod, the terror. He was a terrorist. This teaching of this school that Cush fathered, he invented, he started, that quickly spread from city to city to city to city, if you notice that. And those cities were governed by a king who was responsible to bring in the taxes from those cities, the tribute. Well, of course, with this kind of maneuverability, the kind of force that we're seeing there, we're seeing that from Cain. We saw that from Cain. Cain was the first God worshiper. He's the first teacher of God worship. He was the first Catholic church, the tree of the gods, or the house of the gods. And Yahweh said to him, if you remember, why are you angry? He said in Genesis 49, he showed Yada took up the same anger. Oh, his fury. He says, let my counsel not be with them. Holding this same anger in Genesis 49:10. I won't turn to that. We're in a hurry. But the Pope has condemned the rise of the nationalism and anti-immigrant populism in Europe and has urged EU countries to show unity. That's the picture I just showed you, as representatives as representatives from the 28 nations blocked together to mark the 1957 Treaty of Rome, to assure their support of the Vatican. I want you to turn to Revelations here, Revelation 17, and read that for yourself now. He got these people together for a reason, and he wants their support. He wants their unity, but he wants unity with unjust laws and unjust divisions. And this is why the 10 kings, mentioned also in this same chapter that I showed you not too long ago, the 10 kings in 10 different countries there, he wanted their support. Now, they're going to see the unjustness in this, of course, and they turn against the Vatican. They eat her flesh and destroy her in 1 hour. Burn her with fire. 1 hour. And I've been bringing that out in all these letters. I've also been bringing about, well, let's read this first. The Pope, he sent to gather these people at this meeting. The Vatican had them called together. The Pope gives them, no telling what orders he's given them. This won't come out. This is in secret. Unless some newsman had a camera or a microphone on one of them and leaks it out, which sometimes is the case, you won't know what orders the Vatican gave to these people. They never talk by phone. As Trump says, phones can be tapped. I said when I heard that, wow, you wasn't awake 20 years ago when they said every phone in the world was tapped? Every conversation, I said, at that time from the pulpit, I said, I would they would tap mine so I could teach them something, teach them the way to peace. That was 20 years ago. And he's surprised that somebody's got his phone tapped? The CIA, the FBI, all of these organizations have that power. They can even look into your living room, I'm told. Bedroom, bathroom, wherever you take your phone with you, as I was told this morning. Well, this group of people, the Vatican says, we want your unity. I don't have time to read you all these countries, but there's 28 of these nations. 28 nations. And this group says to them, we want your unity. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. How could it be any clearer than that? And they're saying to them, we want your unity, or else. Well, as you can see, that force has never gotten anything. Now this, of course, if you go back to verse 1 of chapter 17, this is why they can't have unity with this system. And there came one of the 7 Malachim. We are the 7th Malachim, messenger. We are the 7th messenger. We are active. Get this in your mind, brethren. Yahweh's kingdom is an active kingdom too, very complex. And you are a part of it right now. How? One of the 7 messengers, read it of yourself, is the house of Yahweh in these last days. And there came one of these house of Yahweh in the last days. And when the 7th house of Yahweh speaks, the plan of Yahweh is going to be finished. Keep that in your mind. We're the finishing tool that Yahweh has for this 6,000 years plan. 6,000 year plan. I'll give you a little on that. I don't want anyone to go before me. If you got information on it, tell me. But I can't bring it today. I don't have time. The clock is moving too fast. But the 6,000 years, that 6,000 years, the best of my memory, ended in 1996. 6,000 years ended in 1996. You got that? Write it down. 1996. I don't have my papers with me right now. 1996, though, was the first time we offered the offering that Cain and Abel brought. Cain's was refused. Mine was accepted. That was the year of the ear awing. Some mistakes was made. You're supposed to stay in the house 7 years and then vow to Yahweh, I want it forever. 7 years. Remember that. Now, I'll bring more on that later. But that was the very year that the ear awing, not because I knew that was 6,000 years was up, but that was the very year of the ear awing in the house of Yahweh. The end of 6,000 years. That's the plan of Yahweh. 6,000 year plan shown in his feast. Yes. Praise Yahweh for that. Well, back to Revelations now. We'll bring more on that. I will. Much more. Revelation 17, we see the reason this system, Nimrod system, won't work. This is what Yahweh said, the complex kingdom that you're a part of right now. No, you can't run it by yourself. You can't go out on your own. You know, if you leave this house, you're leaving salvation itself. And there came one of the 7 houses of Yahweh, who had the 7 bowls, this is prophecies, and talked with me, saying, come and I will show you the sentence of the great whore. The great whore is, verse 18, that woman, the great whore is that woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. I'll show you the sentence of this great whore that sits upon many waters. Verse 15, waters is multitudes, nations, and languages. She's reaching out to all the world, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, that's practice God worshipers. Know any God-worshiping churches? Any God-worshiping religions? I don't know of any of them out there that doesn't worship God. Some of them the God. Some of them worship the Lord. Others just worship lords, I guess, but they got houses of gods more than they got cities, Yahweh said. Houses of gods. Eliah, who was much like me, he outran the chariots. When I resurrect him, I'm going to run him a race. He outrun the chariots. He didn't do it backwards like I can, but he outran them. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, that's God worship, and the inhabitants of the earth was confused. That word is confused, drunk. Remember these words. Oh, the drunkards of Ephraim. Oh, the drunkards of Ephraim. That's another sermon, but remember that. Been made drunk, that is, confused with the wine of the fornication. This wine of fornication is the teaching of God worship. Better not go there. Let's do Jeremiah 25:15. Jeremiah 25:15. I don't want to throw you off, but I do want you to see that. Jeremiah. Yes, 25:15. For this is what Yahweh, the Father of Israel, said to me: Take the wine cup of this fury from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. All the nations. Well, now, of course, Jeremiah, at this same time that Jeremiah lived, if you study the history, it's like it was in my time right now. They had dignitaries of every nation in Jerusalem. That was one of the leading cities. Made so by Solomon, King David, then Solomon, and it was the leading nation. So Jeremiah took this, as we did, this cup, as we did, flying millions of miles to do that on the wings of an eagle. Yahweh said that, and Abilene, of course, has the wings of the eagle. That's the airline here in Abilene, and this is where we started from. I brought that out years ago in sermons and wrote it in the book, too. But he had these dignitaries, and he went to them. He didn't go to each nation, traveling all the way to every nation, but he had dignitaries in Jerusalem as they do today, and he went to those dignitaries and gave them this warning. And Yahweh said, take it to them, cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. And they will drink and stagger and go and be mad. They're going to drink this and go into confusion. They're going to go, they won't be able to make a sensible decision. Now, the Pope right now is getting ready to depopulate. He's getting ready. He wants everyone. The New World Order consists of only Catholics remaining. That's the New World Order. Of course, others hope to come out on top, Malachi Martin said. Here's the problem. And just as he said also, Russia, who was a teddy bear at that time, could become a great grizzly. And if you noticed in the news, she has become the great grizzly. Now, so get that now. So he told Jeremiah, take this to all these nations and make them drink, and they will drink it, and they will become mad. For this is what Yahweh, the Father of Israel, said to me. Take this wine, this teaching, cup of the fury. That's what you see in Revelations. Well, of course, this is done by the house of Yahweh in these last days, as Jeremiah said it would be in chapter 23. This is the great gathering. If you could understand now what I brought here a while back, I don't know when, but some time ago, that it was us that's on the sea of glass, that Yahshua stands beside, Satan at my right hand opposing me. That's what you see, and that's what Yahweh is seeing right now. Satan is actually sent down to earth, but she's still on the sea of glass in Yahweh's plan until this thing is brought about. But who was talking to Jeremiah? It wasn't Casper the Friendly Ghost now. This was a Malachim for the last days for this generation that you see plainly there in Jeremiah 23. So keep that in mind, Jeremiah 23. This is your great gathering. That's what this feast is about, the great gathering that's going to take place. It's right on our heels right now, this gathering. We've been preaching for many, many years now, bringing this about, and Yahweh is opening the doors for us. And this is what you see here is who's talking to him over here, to Jeremiah, and telling him what to do. Take the wine cup of this fury from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. And they will drink and stagger and be mad. Because of the sword that I will send among them, the wars. Now, this is falsely written. Yahweh doesn't send this. Yahweh predicts that this will come from the action of force that you're inflicting on these people. The force right here that these people are afraid to go against, they're afraid to say a word against it, they disagree with everything the Vatican is doing, or many things that the Vatican is doing, but too afraid to open their mouth. We're the only ones on the face of the earth, brethren, that's voicing Yahweh's opinion, Yahweh's prophecies, as Jeremiah was told to do here by the house of Yahweh before the house of Yahweh was ever invented in these last days or established. You should be able to understand that now as much as I've brought on it. And they're going to go mad. They're not going to bring peace. They're going to bring wars on themselves, is what he's saying here. Then I took the cup from Yahweh's hand and made all the nations drink to whom Yahweh had sent me. He did it. Verse 16. Now go back to Revelations again. Revelation 17. And this same messenger now is saying, come, the same one. And by the way, we went to all of these nations. They all had headquarters in Jerusalem, Israel. And we've Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other places, but we went to all of them. We visited them all. Now, come and I will show you now the sentence of these nations in which this whore, this great whore, verse 18, reign, over which she reigns. The city, the Vatican, reigns on 7 hills. That is, the 7 hills, that's verse 9 of 17. The 7 hills are 7 mountains. I brought that out many times now that the Rome sits on 7 hills. Yada, the kingdom of Yada, sits on 7 hills, with whom the kings of the earth are practicing this God worship. The same God worship that Cain first taught, then Cush invented schools to teach it. If you notice, it's in all the schools today. Every school of the world that you send a child to, they're going to pledge allegiance to this flag, which was invented by the Catholic Church to get this unity that she says she wants here. She still don't have it, but she wants it. She wants the unity that Yahweh wants, but she wants unrighteous laws, as we can see here. She wants them to follow these unrighteous laws that puts money in the pockets, ties up people in bondage to where they can't even have time to study, takes everything back before their death. You see that heavy weight right there. We see it in action right now. President Trump, he wants to demolish the health care that came to be called Obamacare, and Trump wants to abolish this. He is so divided in his own cabinet between the Republicans and the Democrats that his wishes failed. So he withdrew and says, we'll go at it in another way, but he's not giving up. He wants it. He says, this thing is a burden. It's such a burden. Well, and then he made the statement, and the news media played it yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or not, but they saw some things they played some things that he said before his election. He said one of his tools that he was running with was, I'm going to abolish this Obamacare, because he could see that there would be a lot of votes behind this. Well, this was his promise. So now he sees that he can't fulfill that promise. And the news media showed him saying, I never realized how complicated this insurance for everyone would be. Complicated. You get that? The complexity of this kingdom. The complexity of this kingdom of Yada. It is very complex, but it's very unrighteous, and that's the reason it's falling under its own pressure. In the world today, I showed you, or talked about it last week, I think, but in America, we're seeing people living on the streets. They've been kicked out of their homes. They lost their home, they lost their car, they lost everything. Everything was repossessed. We see a lot of this now. They're living on the street. They don't know what to do. The cities don't know what to do with them. I gave some people, that is, I let them use my land in Abilene, just off of TNP Lane next to the railroad tracks. I had a business there, but I'd sold that. But I still have land there, and I let the migrants use that land and told them they're welcome. Just tell them all, you can use it all you want to. Now this was years ago, many years ago. Members of the House, Rodabo, you remember that name? They came to the house of Yahweh one day. They were migrants and came there to that land. Then they heard about the house of Yahweh and who owned the land. And they came there and they worked for the house of Yahweh for many years. Very faithful. And they accomplished a lot while they were here, proved what they could do. And I'm anxiously waiting to resurrect them, of course. But they were part of that migrant land there. I don't know what year that was. I know you're going to ask me, but I don't know what year it was that I told them they could set up tents or whatever they wanted to. It's my land. And if anyone gives you any trouble, I was on the police department at that time, so it had to be before 76. And I said, it's my land. If anyone gives you any trouble, they said, city officials, I said, send them to me, and I'll take care of it. So I had pull in Abilene at that time. I wore a badge of Abilene, a badge of a Roman soldier, the badge that all the America wears right now. I was wearing it then. It's a copy of the Roman shield, exact duplicate of the Roman shield. So I had power at that time. I had the Roman power. It taught me a lot. That 10 years taught me a lot. But anyway, that was the first migrants that I dealt with. And of course, there was others came because of that too, but that was just one that I mentioned. But this right here, we see in today's world now, we see that the people are being put out on the street. They have no place to go. And of course, the religions, the gods they're looking to, they can't help them. But they're trusting them for their life. They can't help them even get a meal. They can't eat. The churches, the religions. We had people this week. We have it all the time. I don't know if the people that we have helped, and the first thing I told the secretaries, first thing I want you to ask them, what church do you belong to? They'd tell them. Did you go to them for help? Yes. And well, they can't help me, they said. So they, last resort, they came to the house of Yahweh. We don't turn anybody down. Well, be it Salvation Army. Have you tried Salvation Army? Yeah, I tried them. I stayed as long as I could, and they kicked me out. Did you get the Thanksgiving turkey? Won't that last you for a year? No. How about the Christmas turkey? Oh boy, what a laugh! It's like Bugs Bunny or the Easter Bunny. Well, this is the mess you see here. And many waters is multitudes, nations, and tongues following this religious organization. Verse 2, Revelation 17, verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed this God worship. Fornication means God worship, if you want to look up the word. And made drunk, as Jeremiah said, made drunk all of these nations, confused, which he used the word mad, but it means crazy. They actually gone crazy. And that's what one of the texts this week sent to me on a news article. They said it looks like they've all gone crazy. Well, that's what Jeremiah said. I said it said the same thing in Jeremiah. Drink with the wine, that's the teaching of this God worship. So he carried me away, and here's where I want to show you the God worshipers, this land of God worshipers. And he saw this woman. I showed this to Jeremiah the prophet. We did. The house of Yahweh actually showed this to Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah the prophet, who wrote it down for the house of Yahweh to show in this time period and put it in the book of Yahweh. Jeremiah was inspired by the house of Yahweh in this time period to write what the house of Yahweh is going to teach, is teaching in this time period. Is that too complex? Think of the complexity of this kingdom of Yahweh. The woman said, so I show you this woman now. From the scriptures, I can show you this woman sitting on the 7 hills. Woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast. That's what we showed Daniel. A few years after we showed Jeremiah, we showed Daniel this woman sitting on the scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy against Yahweh now. You get that? Same thing that Daniel said in Daniel 7:25. Having 7 heads, this is her description, and her location right here that he's given you. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which she sits. And she rules the kings of the earth. She's leader of the kings of the earth. There's no one else could fit that. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations. She's bringing forth abominations and filthiness. And remember that word, because it's going to fit in later, and you'll see this is a clue to show you what another prophet is talking about on this. And we'll see that actually glues it to the house of Yahweh in these last days. Filthiness of this teaching, of her teachings of God worship. A little bit stronger than that in Genesis 3 verse 5. that said, evil like the gods. And upon her head was a name written, Mystery Babylon. The mystery of all of this confusion. Babylon means confusion. We're the ones opposing Babylon. This Babylon, the mystery of it, is kept secret. All of this confusion that you see in the world today, and the news media says, here he's given up because he can't fulfill his word. He's given up on getting this changed. He withdrew it and says, we'll get to it later. Then they said, now he's going to redo the taxes. And they said that with tongue in cheek, I think. Now the same man that can't do this complex thing of changing the insurance is going to go to work on your taxes. Okay? Now they noticed that. I laughed too. But I'm telling you, and I respect Trump. I respect President Trump greatly. He won the election, and that was a very stiff battle against all the news media that he had to fight to do it. But there's no man on the face of the earth, including you, that can lead this universe. Now, we're going to bring about the seventh message, the seventh house of Yahweh, the seventh messenger, which includes the whole house of Yahweh, is going to bring about a kingdom that was promised in the beginning and was shut off because the people were not in unity with Yahweh. They turned to sin. Salvation was cut off. Of course, the Christians brought salvation. Billy Graham had a 1,000,000-soul crusade. Boy, they were bringing them in by the millions. All lies. Every bit of it lies. It was cut off. It would not come into effect again until Genesis 49:11 was fulfilled. 49:11 says, he who comes won't come. He won't come now until the nations are obedient to him. Till Yahweh brings this about through you. Now that's the fact. We are, when the seventh Moloch speaks. Revelations 10:7, I believe. When the seventh Moloch speaks, it's going to be done. Just as Genesis 49:11 says. With Yahshua gathering the nations to the donkeys and the branch. That's when Yahshua will come, and that's what he's doing right now. That didn't take place overnight. The moving of the 12 tribes out of the nation Egypt, the moving them out and taking them to a promised land. Look how long that took in teaching them this. 40 years, 40 years of teaching and trials in the wilderness. 40 years before Yahweh would let them go in to the place where his son was going to be killed, sacrificed by the four horns. They had to all agree with it. Everyone, all 12 tribes of Israel had to agree on killing this man. And Yahweh told them in advance, that's what you're going to do. You're going to destroy my temple. You're going to defile everything that I've given you. You're going to bring war on yourselves. Your children are all going to be crippled and sick. None of that would have taken place if they'd have just followed Yahweh's instruction. Well, Yahweh, too, demands unity for his kingdom. In fact, he salvation is cut off until that is accomplished. We're the first ones. We're the offering that first took place and was acceptable to Yahweh. Otherwise, Yahweh wouldn't have continued his work in 1996. It was offered. It was acceptable for this purpose, for the purpose of continuing this and bringing forth this kingdom that we seek first. We seek it in the righteousness first. Now that is what Yahshua told us to do. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh, and his righteousness. Well, we did. And in 1996, the first ear-owing took place, and Yahweh accepted that offering from us. And I would suggest that if you did it wrong, you might want to do it again this feast. And this feast, Yahweh willing, we will be awing ears on men and women side. And if you've been here 7 years, you can take that vow. And certainly, I think you'll be acceptable if you'll just work at correcting your own difficulties, whatever they might be, however you might fall short. You won't be perfect until you get the new bodies to where you can actually control even your thoughts, your memory, wipe out certain memories. There's a lot of them I'd like to wipe out. I was telling someone the other day that the only memories that I want left is the memories of the work of Yahweh. And my mother and dad, of course, teaching us children. They were very diligent in teaching, and that is a wonderful thing. You want to always praise your mother and dad. That shows honor to them when they correct you. When they correct you, take it and thank them for it, and praise Yahweh that you've got someone that wants to teach you righteousness, because I tell you, Nimrod is not the way to go today, and you can prove it. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!